What is up, everybody? Welcome to Ginger Runner Live, episode number 102. Tonight, I'm joined by an incredibly talented creator, filmmaker, Joel Wolpert. I am really excited about tonight's show. I get to pick the brain of a master, and you watching live will also get to do the same. So if you guys are in the chat room or joining us live, if you have questions for Joel throughout tonight's broadcast, please bring them into the chat room, and we'll make sure that those questions get asked. I'm very excited about tonight's show, so sit back, relax, and welcome everybody to Ginger Runner Live. Ginger Runner. Yay! So excited. Episode number 102. Before I introduce tonight's guest, there's lots to talk about. So much to talk about in the ultra world happened this weekend. I'll try to make it very, very brief. Big congratulations to a number of people from who raced this last weekend, including Stephen Wassither, Devin Yanko, Jesse Haynes, Amelia Boone, who got first and second, both men and women respectively, at Sean O'Brien 100K this weekend. They will be going to Western States by winning the golden tickets. Huge congratulations to them. Ian Sharman at Rocky Raccoon. Gordy Ainsley managed to qualify for Western by finishing Rocky Raccoon as well, which is pretty amazing. And a big thank you to the Inside Trails crew up at the Ordnance 100K for having both myself and my good buddy Ben, former guest of the show, Ben Gibbard, ran his very first 100K this weekend and crushed it. And there was a lot of stories coming in as well from live viewers and followers of the Ginger Runner, with many stories from this last weekend of doing incredible things. So keep those stories coming, because I believe it's either going to be next week or the week after we're going to do the stories from the viewers episode. So if you have any stories of triumph or races that you've experienced in the last couple of weeks, make sure you email those to me so we can cover them in the live show. Really excited about that. Tonight, I have a guest that I've been a fan of for a number of years. And I was just, before the show started here, I was mentioning to him, and it kind of dawned on me that I've had the subjects of his films on the show, but I have not yet had him on the show. And it was time to remedy that. He's incredibly talented. Honestly, I look up to this guy as being one of, if not the best filmmaker right now in trail and running and outdoor adventures. Welcome to the show, Joel Wolpert. What's up, man? How's it going?
Good. Great, thanks.
Where are you coming to us live from?
I'm in a friend's house in Seattle currently.
Oh, nice, Seattle. That's my home city. Where do you currently reside? You're like East Coaster, right?
Yeah, but I've been on the road for the last 5 months.
Creating new projects and working?
Yeah, pretty much just working. Had a little bit of time to just for fun here in the last month. We went up in Canada for a while, but mostly just working.
Nice. How much of your schedule these days is dedicated to filmography, photography, basically your creative passions and outlets?
I mean, that's pretty much what I do. I've had a pretty long run this year, well, this past year of just working pretty straight through. So, yeah, maybe, I don't know, the majority of my time has been film and photography stuff.
I'm really curious just kind of how you got started in it. As far as, like, did you go to school specifically for creating visual content, or was it something that you kind of discovered and found a passion for later?
Right. No, I studied design in college, and then I got into making films, but I was rock climbing a lot then, so I made a lot of rock climbing films. And then I took a break from that. I think I got a little bored with it because I wasn't as interested in the stories as, like, in climbing, you either climb a problem or a route or you don't, and I didn't really see beyond that.
Sure.
And so then I took a pretty long break from it and got back into making films about running in 2008 or so. I did a few little projects for Running Times before I started doing kind of the films that probably most of you guys are familiar with.
One in particular, we can start here just because, at least in the timeline for me, this is the one that stood out earliest for me, and that's In the High Country, where you followed Anton Krupicka in his running escapades. what was the process like that? In were you friends with Anton beforehand? Was there a vetting process? Did you find a story that you wanted to tell and tried your best to do that by contacting him and like, hey, I want to tell your story? How did that film come into fruition?
I did a film with him called The Runner in Winter for Running Times in 2010, and that was the first time I met him. I was probably wearing the exact same clothes that I'm wearing right now. I think I was wearing a flannel shirt, and we had planned to meet up to film something in Boulder, and for some reason I didn't have a cell phone and he didn't have his cell phone or something, so I ended up just going to Green Mountain and hiking around until I ran into him, literally.
That's the best way ever. That's fantastic.
Yeah, so I had this shirt on and like a blaze orange hunting cap and like a tripod, but I was just shooting some random shots, and so we came up the trail, and I was like, oh, I figured I'd run into you here, and he was a little taken aback because he had no idea who I was at the time, but he was anyway. So we get along fine, and so we made that movie. And then I guess it was a couple of years later, I had the idea to do like a longer personal project. And I asked him if he was interested, and he was. And so we started filming in 2012, like right after he ran Leadville. And then we filmed for like about a month that year. And then kind of in the process of I edited that footage into what became the trailer, and then we found some sponsors, and kind of from a month's worth of footage and spending time with him, I realized what I wanted the story to be about.
Yeah.
So then I went back and filmed with him 3 different times in 2013 to make In the High Country. So that was my first big personal project.
Yeah, I kind of gathered just by watching it and kind of seeing the evolution of it that I imagine that this was the passion project that you found the subject that you really wanted to tell the story about and created something over the course of a long time. Was it hard to piece it together, to do the editing side of things and to try to tell that story at all?
Yeah, it was terrifying, and I feel like, since it was my first big project, I think by the end of it, I could have done the project that I wanted to do at the beginning, but I had already finished.
Yeah.
You're probably familiar with that, but yeah. And I think it was a huge learning process, and I don't know how close what I made was to what I wanted to make, but I learned a ton about storytelling, both from like successes and failures of that project. And of course, it was a great like public success. A lot of people liked it, and
Yeah.
I'm so thankful that all of you people were interested in it. I never intended to sell it. I just wanted to make the project, and I got enough funding to make it. And then after it released, and we did 2 screenings in Boulder, and after it released, there was just big public interest in it.
I'm always really curious about that balance between public latching onto something and supporting it, downloading it, buying it, renting it. I know that Vimeo does both of those, and then also the sponsor support. Do you have an avenue that you are trying to pursue more than the other, like sponsored content where you're able to be paid and funded to go pursue the projects, or the back end with viewer support? Is there one that works better for you, or?
Yeah, it's a good question, because you have it's an interesting kind of conundrum, because selling things isn't very enjoyable to me, so it's pretty stressful. I'd rather just do the work, but you have a lot more freedom, doing personal projects. I tend to have kind of like weird, obscure, like quirky things that I want to film.
Yeah.
And it's hard to find commercial support for that. I don't know. It's almost like I don't really want to make movies for anybody, I guess. I'd be happy just like not making movies, but it's something that I like to do. It's just, yeah, it's a kind of love-hate thing. But so no, I don't know. I like making short films, like the one that I just released with Ricky, and then the one with Rob last year. And those are really satisfying, but those both were self-release projects with zero funding. So
Right.
there's no commercial benefit to me. Although I feel like so I've done a few projects for sale, and I kind of like to do some for free. So just, I don't know, it's like a sweetener, people like the ones and I appreciate that they buy them. So it's nice to have like a small project that you can just watch for fun.
Well, I mean, kind of as someone who's just going to buy or watch every one of your films, regardless of what it is, because I'm just a fan, with Depressions, that was the first one that I think, other than when you ran with Anton in the winter, which I believe was free on YouTube. I don't know if you posted it or if another, like a company posted it, or if Running Times posted it, I forget. It's still available for viewing, but I remember watching that and going, oh, this is, beautifully shot film and it's for free. But with Depression, that was the same thing that I noticed, was that it was free. And it was an incredibly powerful visual story told with someone who has something very important to say and helped an incredible number of people. What has the feedback to that film been like compared to some of your projects that or maybe bigger in scale, maybe more work also involved over the course of like years, to create? What's the response been like comparing those two types of projects?
Yeah, I don't know, Depressions was awesome. I mean, just so many people, even a lot of non-runners found it really useful, almost like a tool, like vocabulary to help deal with the issues that they have. And that's like a way to go through life. And so it's not like the topics that are in that movie are like visually metaphorical, but also just something that is more universal than a sport can be. And I think that's pretty awesome. How it came about is kind of funny, because I filmed the footage and I was hoping to do something commercially, but as with most of my projects, couldn't get anybody to kind of fund it. And also, you can't film in the national parks without a permit for a commercial project. So I had footage that I really liked that paired well with the interview that I couldn't sell, so I just released it for free. So that was my motivation.
I mean, I you probably know the numbers and all the back end and all that stuff, and I wouldn't even want to begin to assume, but would you consider Depressions your most viral success today?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's had I don't like day in, day out, but it's had a few 100,000 views, and yeah, I think it got like shared around the most and had the greatest effect on a lot of people. And so, yeah, that's pretty satisfying. Again, it's like most of my films, like, they're not planned how they come out when I start. So I wasn't trying to make a movie about depression. And it just came about that, Rob and I got along well, and he was open talking about it off camera from pretty early in my visit. I only spent a week with him, and we weren't like, I kind of didn't want to make a movie about depression because it seems like kind of an easy mark. I don't really like movies that are melodramatic, and I think that's like why we deal with the subject in the way we do, because you're not trying to like glorify either the running nor the disease, if you want to call it that. So to like is, in my opinion, than to try to like play it up with a bunch of like sappy music.
It by far is one of the most impactful films that I've seen from you. It's fantastic. I remember seeing it for the first time on the big screen, and it's glorious. I mean, you obviously have a location that's fantastic, and then the subject was fantastic. So it was great, and I really appreciate you creating that, and it's helped a lot of people both personal and in my life, and also myself. So thank you for creating it. It's really, really fantastic. We have great chat going on here in the live chat room. If you are watching live and you have a question for Joel, please keep the questions coming. I'm going to scroll back here because I think there was something back here from Tim. Says, I was really hesitant about the $15 for outside voices for 45 minutes, but I am so glad I purchased it instead of the renting it. Based on the two experiences, Joel's work is well worth the full price. So thank you, Tim, and I know Joel will be happy to hear that as well. We're going to talk about outside voices here right now. So I'm really curious about this film. How did this project come about? Had you been in contact with Jen for a while, or what was your drive behind creating outside voices?
So it was kind of twofold. Jen seemed like from afar, like she was friends with a bunch of people I know. She's friends with Tony and Ricky and Scott Jurek, and she just seemed like a charismatic person who, you know, a lot of us have read Born to Run, and when I read it, I felt like she was probably mischaracterized or kind of characterized. And when I talked to Tony, he kind of confirmed that that was her feeling, and so I was curious to see what she was actually like. So I kind of, after I met Ricky at the Rut a couple years ago, I was out there and just met him, and that has kind of, you know, went on to make the movie that I just released. But through him, I got in touch with Jen and was just kind of chatting with her to see if she was game for anything. And then actually, coincidentally, when Wisconsin go with Ricky, I got an email from Vimeo who noticed that In the High Country had sold well, and they wanted to see if I would do another project. So they let me pick who I wanted to film, and that's how that came about.
That's awesome. That seemed to work out quite well. Great questions here in the chat room. Kimusabe, Joel, loved the film. Really cool that you were pursuing your filming passion, but how do you make a living?
I don't have very many costs in my life. I guess meaning I live like pretty simply. So I support it entirely on running movies, and then I do some other work in West Virginia, but it's all some mostly photography and a little bit of design, but it's all storytelling stuff, and I do the same thing. I'm not only interested in running. There's a lot of more interesting things in the world out there too that I enjoy. So I spent last spring doing a whole bunch of work for a nonprofit back home called the Tucker Community Foundation, and I ended up using it as a way to do just a portraiture project, both in words and images of the people who live where I live.
Are you able at this point, I'm going to kind of dovetail this with the viewer's question. Geek with a Side of Nerd is wondering if sales on Vimeo have covered your productions costs. I'm really curious if before you create something like Outside Voices or Depressions or anything like this, do you do the full filmmakers package where you plan out the budget for the full thing, including travel costs and all that sort of lodging and any sort of costs that you might incur on site? Or do you just run and gun, where your goal is to just collect as much and create something kind of out of that?
Right. Yeah, it's definitely not the former. There's no way to know, especially working the way that I do, there's no way to know what's going to go into a film. I usually film like pretty slim, and I don't sink a lot of extra money into something, but pretty much I've paid for my do it. I've planned it. In the High Country worked a little bit differently. Like I spent my own time and money to film that first month of it. But like I said, I live pretty cheaply. Like I spent a month in Colorado, and I lived in my car, which I'd driven from West Virginia, and the total cost to me was $1,000 for that.
Wow.
So I pretty much didn't eat much and just paid for gas and slept in my Subaru. And so I didn't get any funding for that film until like the following December, and that was enough to cover the whole production. So Yeah, I didn't go into the red for. I just generally don't like run on debt. That's just the way that I work. I do what I can with what I've got. And outside voices, I had budget from Vimeo, which was like an advance, kind of like a book deal.
Oh yeah.
And so I guess I knew what my budget was ahead of time. I guess I didn't plan it. You can't plan it to the letter for sure.
Yeah. Great questions coming. Amber is asking, on average, what is the duration time you need to make your films?
Let's see. I guess it really depends on what kind of film you're making. If you make a kind of ethnographic film, like the one with Rob or the one with Ricky, even where you're just trying to capture like a moment in time, you could do a film in a day. But basically, I spent a week with Rob on Depressions, and then most of my time, if I get the chance, I don't like to sit at a computer and look at a blank screen to start editing. So when I usually drive out, film something, drive home, and then I spend months like just gardening and chopping wood, and then I think about the movie kind of in the back of my head, and then when I get the idea, then I go edit it, and I can kind of knock it out. So Depressions, maybe a day and a half. It's got very few cuts, and that was what I wanted to do. The movie with Jen that I just filmed, I filmed for about 3 weeks with Jen. I'd spent a week with her earlier in the summer, and then I drove out to Durango around the time of Hard Rock, and I spent a week with her then and didn't really film anything. And then I've spent 3 weeks with her in September. Then I spent a month traveling around doing like B-roll time-lapse shots, not working all of every day because I was traveling with my family, but so basically kind of like 2 months filming, and then I spent 6 weeks editing because I had a deadline for December 15th.
Right.
You might notice it didn't release that day because I couldn't get the music rights in time, so it released a week late, basically.
Damn it. There's a good question in here from Jesse. Did you have any trouble keeping pace with Rob Krar in Depressions? Huge question. I had to know as well.
Yeah. Everybody who knows this weren't a problem. The uphills were definitely harder. That's probably the hardest bit of filming that I've ever done. And I feel pretty good about it. At one point, so it was probably, we ran a mile or 2 miles down together. He was in the middle of a 30-mile run, and then we did similar on the way up. It was more than a mile on the way up. And he dropped me at one point, and I think I even said to him, like, okay, I'll see you at the rim. But then I realized like that he wasn't pulling away. So like he had gapped me a little bit, but I just put in a huge surge, and he noticed that. And so he like let off a little bit to let me catch up. So yeah, all told, he probably waited for me like, I don't know, like 10 seconds or something on that effort. And I was just like, all the breathing sounds in that movie are me. You know, it's just I cut out the worst ones because I was definitely like we're a fair amount, because the camera stabilizer that I use is about 10 pounds, and so I live at 1,500 feet elevation in West Virginia. Drove out to Arizona, and then you're at 8,000 feet and doing pretty hard work. So yeah, I don't know. That's kind of my niche, is suffering pretty hard.
I mean, I think that's a great question to kind of dovetail into what's your history as a runner. You talked about climbing, having a climbing background. Have you run ultras? Is that something that you're passionate about?
I'd like to say I don't make a habit of racing ultras. I ran my first ultra distance run on my 22nd birthday or so. But it wasn't a race. I lived in central Pennsylvania that summer, and it wasn't actually my birthday. It was like my day off from work. I worked at a canoe and kayak store, and So I did like 50K basically on the Appalachian Trail, but just because it was like from where I was living to the DeHart Dam and then back. And so it took a long time because I was self-supported. Like I didn't know there was any other way to do it. You know, I just carried stuff in the backpack, and I had to wait to like purify water at the one end. So I had like iodine tablets. So I had to I chugged like a quart of water and then I refilled and like, yeah, did that. I've run 3 races. One without, like my first ultra was a 50 miler that I ran on like 2 days notice. I ran the Vermont 50 and went okay. I had IT problems, but I managed to get second, and did all right.
That's pretty good. Yeah.
Yeah. that was a while ago. That was like 2005 or 2004 or something like that. And then I've run the same ultra in West Virginia called Highland Sky. It's like a 40 miler. I've run that twice, and I ran it in 2008 and did well. But then combination, like a long story combination of circumstances, I was hurt for a year, another ultra until just this past year, and I ran this Highland Sky again. It's an amazing race if you guys ever get a chance to try it.
Sounds amazing.
Yeah.
People are talking about it in the chat room, and it's really what made me want to reach out to Joel, and that is There on the Periphery, which is a film that he just dropped yesterday. I mean, literally last night, right?
Yeah, I think it was like I tried to wait until after midnight on the East Coast. Yeah.
I only learned this today, but it sounds like you've been sitting on it for a while, having filmed with Ricky Gates a year ago. But the film itself is beautifully shot. It's fantastic. I've met Ricky a couple of times, and I feel like your film manages to capture his personality perfectly. Can you kind of explain how you and Ricky crossed paths? Because it's such a fascinating and wonderful collaboration.
Yeah. So I met him at the rut two ruts ago, I guess. The first like Skyrunner championship there. Just traveling a bit, and I took still pictures for I think Running Times and Competitor that year. And I met him at the finish line. I just introduced myself because he seemed like from afar, he seemed like an interesting guy, and we hit it off fine. And they were he and a bunch of Solomon athletes were doing a run across the Beartooth Absaroka Wilderness that the next like week or so. Oh, wow. And so he invited me along, and I don't think the filmmakers who were making that, I don't think they really were too keen on me coming, but I managed to like carpool with Mike Foote, so we got in. I only ended up running one day with them, but just hung out, and we got along fine. And it turned out that right after that he was driving to Madison, moving to Wisconsin, and I kind of really enjoy making films where nobody else is going to bother to go. And, like mountain running is, most of my work is out west in the Rockies somewhere. He's going to make a video in Wisconsin. Like I had heard about this place where these ice caves were that earlier that summer. And so when I heard he was moving to Wisconsin, I was like, hey, why don't we go to these ice caves this winter? And so he's pretty game for any adventure. So I just drove up. It was like a typical trip. It was the middle of the winter, and I drove from West Virginia to Cincinnati, bought a pickup truck, and then left my car there and drove it to Madison, picked him up. Then we went to Bayfield and camped out in the back of the truck for, I guess we spent 2 nights up there. The first night that you see like in the film with the bonfire, and then like the next morning it was like -20, and we were camping in the back of the Tacoma we each had 2 sleeping bags. So
I think there's a bit of audio echo. You might have to turn down your laptop just a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, sorry. I think the internet's lagging a little bit, so it's causing just a little bit of an echo.
Yeah,
I can imagine it was extremely cold, because just the shot of Ricky pulling the sleeping bag off of his head, you can see the crust of moisture on the outside of those sleeping bags. I mean,
yeah,
Is that, do you like to put yourself in these situations where it's a challenge and you can get the most out of your subject? I mean, is that something that played a role here at all?
Uh, I
Or is that
think
just natural? Like,
I
just kind
think
of
it
what
just
happens?
happens, you know, like if you're gonna go to interesting spots, I don't know, discomfort comes up a lot. And like I said, I don't really like filming when there's other camera people around. So you weed out a lot of people when you get really crappy weather. So
Yeah.
it's not really like, that's not my intent, but it helps for sure.
The dancing. So my favorite scene. It's a wonderful long take, brilliantly measured and presented. Was he dancing to music at all, or is this just Ricky Gates just doing what he does?
He was dancing to that exact song.
It's
Yeah,
fantastic.
he had, yeah. I'm a sucker for really long takes. And Outside Voices has a bunch of them too. I feel like more than I realized after I started making movies that you can't ever capture all of reality. And so it's better to not really try, but to have these long moments without any interpretation lets the viewer kind of feel like I don't know, it gives you a better feeling of that moment than trying to say who a person is for all their moments.
Do you have a? So I mean, I guess that kind of it's interesting that I wanted to ask this question, but now that may have just answered it. As far as, do you enjoy a well edited piece or a piece that presents its subject maybe in a more whole light, like you just said, by having fewer takes and less polish and stuff like that? Do you have a preference? Is there
Yeah.
a...
Yeah, I mean, the ideal world, you get both. I really like long shots, but I really don't like crappy camera shake. That that bugs me too. So I try to do both at the same time. You know, it's um, I feel like I end up, and I don't know if it's just runners, but like if you compare filming running the way I do to, I don't know, ski films or skate films, there's much, I end up, I feel like I have less collaboration a lot of the times with the subject than, you know, if you're filming a ski film, you're not gonna like drop a huge cliff before the cameraman's ready. But in running, you know, like when I film with Tony, anybody who's run with him knows, like, he doesn't wait for you. Like, if he drops you, like, that's it. You're not gonna see him again. And
Yeah.
so it's not like it's like no harm intended on his part. It's just that's the way he runs, and a lot of runners are like that. Like, got to get the run in. It has to be like certain speed and everything, and so a lot of it is like trying to do running as hard as you can. I don't know. That's what I end up doing.
Yeah. There's questions earlier on in the chat room as well about gear, and this is a part where I can nerd out with you, I'm sure, for hours.
Sure.
Really curious on gear. What cameras do you prefer? What things are in your stable that you wish you had had years ago, but now you have and you can't live without? What are your go-tos? That sort of stuff.
Right. Yeah. Currently, the cameras that I have the Canon 5D Mark II and Mark III. And that's pretty much it. A bunch of lenses. Although, I don't know. I have yeah, for anybody who actually wants to know, I have a 70-200 f2.8. I've got a 50 millimeter f1.4, 20 f2.8, 100 macro that's f2.8, a doubler, and I think that's about it.
So nothing super wide.
No, did I say I have a 20 f2.8?
Yeah, 20 f2.8. Yeah.
And that the 5D Mark III is kind of on its last legs. I don't know, it gets hammered a bit. I try to be pretty nice to my camera equipment, but it's still getting a little quirky. The main toy that I have now is the Freefly Movi M5, and that's what. Without that, there's no way I could have shot Depressions. And when I shot in the high country, I had a passive stabilizer for my camera,
Yeah.
and that was you had to use two hands to hold it, one to hold the camera and one to aim it, and that meant running with your hands in front of you. And if you've ever tried to do that running technical downhills, it's really hard on your core. Because you're like supporting this weight out front. So with the Movi, it's 3 pounds heavier or so, but you only need to use one hand, and you can switch hands. So all of most of the cuts and depressions are for either when my shadow was in the shot, I cut those out, or hands. So
yeah, I was wondering if a gimbal system was kind of was added to the arsenal, and is it something that that you bring with you on all these adventures? Have you figured out a system to be able to carry all the gear into the backcountry, or do you end up carrying a huge backpack full of different lenses, or do you bring one lens and just work with that?
Yeah, that's generally what I do. If I have my druthers, I get to know what run we're doing, which isn't always the case, but I try to like guess or like see what I'm trying to catch. And if I run the gimbal, I guess I've used all but one of my lenses on it. I've shot with the 20, and that's the easiest, because you get the best depth of field, and you don't get to look through the camera when you're running and filming, so it's all spatial sense. And a lot of people have asked me in depressions if I'm running backwards filming, and it's not true. I'm running forwards and just holding the gimbal backwards on my spatial sense. So that's like the tricky part there. You can't look at the screen because you'll fall.
Yeah.
I did that once when I filmed with Jeff Rose. I think it's still out there on the internet, the slogging to the top. If you watch the outtakes at the credits, you can see like a pretty great, like terrible fall that I took. And that was the only fall I think I've had with, when I've been filming. But it was a bad one. I hit it really hard.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect dovetail into the next question. What has been maybe one of the worst parts of maybe an experience that you filmed, like falling or any sort of danger or anything like that? And then also, what has been one of your most memorable moments in all of the filmmaking that you've done in the recent years? Okay,
the worst part was probably filming Alexander's Chimney that was in the high country, and that's a route on the Diamond on Long's Peak, like the east face, and show me that the typical route that he went up was really icy, so we decided to pick a different route. And so we were on site free soloing, and it was rated at 5.6, but it was really icy. And once we got onto the solid rock, I felt pretty comfortable, but it was at Tony's limit. And there was a pitch where it was a dihedral where one side was the slab and the other side was pretty significantly overhanging. And so I climbed up at first because it's good policy never to follow somebody who's less certain than you on free soloing, because if they fall off, then they pull you off. So I went up, and when I got to the ledge above that pitch, I couldn't see him any longer, and it took him like 45 minutes to climb that pitch, and he wouldn't respond when I like yelled at him, and so I just was worried that he was gonna die. That was the yeah.
Were you carrying your gear up and everything too? So an additional 15 pounds of gear?
I went. My logic before that, I think, sound but kind of quirky in that I brought my crappy camera and a really junky lens.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if my thought was like, well, if I fall off this mountain, then at least I'm not going to break my good camera. I don't know what the logic really was, but that's what I brought. So it was just, there was a little like hot shoe mic as well.
Got it.
And actually, I like the footage a lot. It's kind of shaky because I'm shivering because it was cold in the icy part and scared, whatever. But so yeah, at one point I slipped. Oh no, I was climbing up the chimney with the ice part, and the hot shoe mic came off, but it was still attached by the 1/8" jack. And So I was kind of mid-pitch, and I one-handed, and picked the mic up and put it back in the hot shoe and tightened it down and kept climbing.
Badass.
So yeah, I don't know, like for like a best moment, I don't know really. That one is a lot harder to answer. I don't think I've got like a.
I mean, what your footage also speaks volumes, because you amassed quite a series of incredible vantage points, shots, long takes of individuals. I can imagine you have a number of great moments and great memories from a lot of your shoots.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy the challenges? Do you consider that part of the whole recipe?
Yeah, I'd say I don't think it would feel right without them. I mean, if it was always, every project has its very challenging parts, and it's always different for everyone. And yeah, I think it wouldn't feel like you were accomplishing anything if it was just easy peasy.
Mm-hmm. What is next? I'm really curious what's next for Joel. Obviously, you just released There on the Periphery last night. Everyone, if you have a chance, right after the show's over, go watch it. It's amazing. And Outside Voices, go get it, rent it or buy it. But what's next? Have you thought about what sort of projects you want to complete this year or next year, or the goal of like the best person like your prime subject that you've always wanted to work with?
Yeah, I don't know. Somebody asked me that if I could pick anybody. Well, I shouldn't spoil their thunder, but they were saying, like, if I could pick anybody, living or dead, to film, who would I pick? And I said Tirnesh Dababa and the Dababa sisters, because I don't know, they're mysterious and beautiful and super fast, and they're Ethiopian, which means generally that it's a lot harder to access them as an athlete. That would be awesome, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Never know.
I don't know. I don't. Other than that, like, I kind of don't really want to film anything right now. I spent a long time on Outside Voices, and I think it was a real challenging film to make. And I don't know if I did a good job of it or not, but I tried my hardest, and it was just like, the long projects definitely take a lot more of your energy. It took me 6 weeks to edit that, and that was rushing. Whereas like a fun, like, short one, like There on the Periphery, took 2 days to film, and I don't know, probably the same to edit, just because we had the song. It's an awesome Sylvanessa was great, and it's just a fun. The only point of it is because it's fun, and I think I feel like my films have less and less running in them as they go. Like, at some point, I'm going to make a running film that has not a bit of running in it at all. I don't know how I'll pull that off, but
yeah, I mean, you have quite a bit of dancing in There on the Periphery, so you have quite a career in dance filmography. Just FYI, it's absolutely fantastic. I was just going to ask something dovetailing on that. It's fine. Again, if you guys are watching live, we have Joel Wolpert, incredible filmmaker, running filmmaker, outdoor adventure filmmaker. If you have questions for him, please ask in the chat room. We're going to begin to wrap up the show. But before we do, Joel, with all guests that I have on the show for the first time, this is your first time on the show. I have a very easy little segment just called the Quickie Question Quiz. I have a series of rapid fire questions that all you have to do is just answer as quickly as possible. First thing that comes to mind. You let me know when you're ready, and I will just start ripping through them.
Okay, I'm ready.
What was your first race?
I ran a fun run when I was in elementary school.
I think this next one will probably be difficult, but what is your favorite running movie, or maybe one that you go back to for inspiration?
I like Chariots of Fire.
Trails or road?
I'm not particular. Anything with a good view.
Favorite place to run currently?
It's a good question. Well, I'm in Seattle, so I ran along Lake Washington this morning so I could see Mount Rainier.
Yeah, you guys have amazing weather there right now. Super jealous.
That's great. Yeah. We spent a few weeks on Vancouver Island, and it rained pretty constantly, and now it's sunny here.
If you can get out to the Cascades at all, highly recommend it. Tiger, Squawk, Cougar Mountains are amazing, amazing trails.
Cool.
What is a bucket list race, or in your case, maybe a bucket list destination that you've always wanted to visit?
Let's say Mongolia.
Guilty pleasure television show.
The most recent thing we watched is All Creatures Great and Small, which is an old BBC show. We watched it on video. We don't have a TV, so other than that, I don't know. I don't know what's on currently.
For most guests, whether they're an elite or they're racing or they are an individual that is competing currently in some sort of race scenario, we ask these next couple of questions. I'm going to alter them for you because I feel like it might need that. What is your favorite pre-adventure meal? Normally it's pre-race meal, but pre-adventure meal for you.
I'll say bagels.
And your favorite post-adventure indulgence, something you do or eat or partake in as soon as you get home to the comfort of your bed or your bedroom or your kitchen or your house.
Okay, usually water.
That's it. That's simple. And what are your current running kicks? What are you running in now?
I have a couple pairs. I've got a pair of Innovate. I don't even know the models, but they're nice. I like the X Talons a ton. That's not what I have currently. I was just trying something else out.
Mm-hmm.
But if I race, I generally race in the X Talons. And I have a pair of La Sportiva crossovers that are sweet because I was in Montana for a while, so running got pretty snowy. I did a bunch of like knee-deep runs that were terrible in normal shoes. And then usually I have a pair, thanks to some friends, some New Balances. I like the Zantes for road shoes.
Oh, I was just talking about those with a friend today. Yeah, the Zantes are dynamite shoes.
Yeah, they're nice.
We have a good question here in the chat before we move into the post show from Geek with a Side of Nerd. What's the best part? Is it the camera work, the editing, or the directing for you?
Say that one more time.
What is your favorite part? Is it the camera work, so the adventures, the shooting, the editing, creating the story, or the directing, the finished product?
Definitely the shooting. Yeah, that's I feel like I'm a cameraman who edits out of necessity. I think to answer that more fully, I don't really enjoy editing, but if it's a personal project, I don't really want anybody else to do it for me. So
nice. A big thank you to Joel Wolpert for joining me on tonight's show. I'm honored to have him on the show. He's an incredibly talented filmmaker. If you haven't already, go check out his work. It's all available on Vimeo. Search for the Wolpertinger. I also have a link in the description right now to Outside Voices, his most recent film with Jen Shelton. The one that he dropped yesterday is also viewable there. Highly recommend going and watching that. If it'll help just get you into the spirit to watch all of his films because it is fantastic. It's funny. It features Ricky Gates. Highly recommend it. Joel, any other places where people can find you? Website, social media, anything like that?
Yeah, the Wolpertinger.com is my website, and then there's a Facebook thing. I don't use it too much, and I think the Wolpertinger.tumblr.com, if you want to see some that's more just like pictures from our travels. We're in the middle of a 6-month road trip where I built a camper top actually to make the Outside Voices film, and then we've kept traveling. So you can see pictures of the crazy rig that we're driving around there.
Is that a Volvo? I forget, what kind of car is it? Is it
no, we have a Toyota Tacoma with a wood strip camper top.
Is that the one that looks like the Bug, or it's like a smooth rounded top or something?
Yeah, that's right.
It looks amazing. That thing looks badass. So thank you so much, Joel. Really appreciate you being on the show. If you are a regular viewer of the show, stick around. You know the drill. We do a real quick post show where we can kind of rapid fire some of your viewer questions with Joel before we let him go. But that is it for episode number 102. A very big good luck and break legs and kick ass to all those running the LA Marathon Olympic qualifiers this weekend. A lot of friends, a lot of guests of the show are running this weekend here in Los Angeles. I hope to see all of them and maybe get interviews and have someone on next Monday's show. Hopefully someone going to the Olympics. That'd be really fantastic. Big weekend in Los Angeles and for running in general. Thank you all for tuning in live tonight. Really appreciate that. And make sure you go to the Vimeo and download and buy all of the Wolpertinger films because they're fantastic, well worth it, and very inspirational. They'll get you guys off your ass and out there running and experiencing nature. That is it for tonight's show. Stick around for the post show. You guys know the drill. Here we go.
Ginger Runner.
Nice, man. That we're still live. This is the post show where we kind of ask questions maybe didn't get asked in the chat room. People were also wanted to know, was it a full frame camera, the Canon 5D Mark II and III?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. I think the 5D Mark II was one of the first full frame cam. Oh, the 5D probably was the first full frame.
I think 5D was, yeah, but I mean the technology's changed even just in the last like 6 months, where full frame is now. It depends on what the sensor is, whether the cropping is going to make it full. It's crazy.
Right.
I've tried to do all the research, and it's basically it's just too much information to try to load in there.
Yeah.
Is there any gear that's on your list of must gets?
I'd like to try a mirrorless camera, the Sony A7S II or the A7R II. One of those I want to try. They're so much lighter, so that's for me. The form factor is less important than the weight because I've got to carry everything. Like you were saying earlier about how I bring gear or whatever. I usually pick each day like what I'm going to run, and then I try to pick my kit based on what I expect to be doing or what kind of shots I want to get. So if I take the Movi for like a long hike in approach, I have a waterproof dry bag that I put it in in case the weather gets real bad. With Jen, I did the longest probably take that I've done, 12 miles, the Circle and Steamboat. And the problem with the active gimbals is you can't set them down. So for the duration of the run, you're holding it.
Yeah. Is there a backpack that you recommend for people who maybe are trying to? I'm in the market right now, and I've been like killing myself trying to find the right pack that will not only work for moving fast, but also moving lightweight and being able to carry all the gear. I
don't have a magic bullet. You know, like the dry bag that I've got is a Patagonia like fishing pack, but it's just because the Movi is a weird size, so it won't fit in a normal backpack.
Can't really stash it, right? Yeah.
Right. For running bags, I have some UD pack that Buzz Burrell gave me when I started in the high country, and I've got a Solomon skin pack that Ricky gave. I think he gives to everybody who do the hut run hut, and that works pretty well. I tried to hack it up and put a bunch of audio gear in it this summer, and it didn't work very well for that. I tried wearing it backwards with a bunch of audio gear. I've
basically hacked my packs as well to carry whatever various piece of gear, and it always feels too Frankenstein. It always feels something's wrong, like it's not riding right, and you know something, the weight shifts the wrong way, and it just becomes a fucking problem.
I used to sell a lot of my own backpacks, so I can hack them.
Oh, really?
But that was like a last minute thing. I like ripped a hole in it for some cables, and the spandex on the skin part just shook too much. But I also did when I filmed like the track scene in Outside Voices. I have a shotgun mic with a Zeppelin and Dead Cat mounted on the Movi handlebar, and then I had a good sound recorder just like actually tied on to my torso with like webbing straps, and it was great sound for it, which I really like.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like doing any sort of all the best shots or all the most creative work are done either not by accident, but done with some sort of jerry rigging out there in the field. I feel like any of the shots that I bring back and go, this is the best shot ever, had something that you'd be like, oh, this is going to ruin the shot as you're filming it. And then you get it back and go, everything worked. And attaching an audio device to your waist with webbing sounds like one of those instances where you're like, this is going to totally blow. It's not going to sound good, but it sounded great. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, man, I really appreciate you taking the time out tonight. I'll let you get back to friends and family or wherever you are in Seattle. People were commenting on the bookshelf. They're They're admiring the scale of the bookshelf behind you. They're very
it's awesome. It's my friend Dominic's books. He's got some good ones.
But I really appreciate taking the time out tonight, man, and good luck and congratulations on all the success, dude. Really appreciate you taking the time out.
Yeah, thanks.
You got it, man. Talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
Cool. And that's it for tonight's show, guys. Joel, an incredibly talented individual. I really appreciate you guys tuning in live. We'll see you guys next week. That's it for this show. Episode number 102 is now done. Get out there, train hard, race harder, party hardest. You know the whole drill. Really appreciate all the support, guys. And subscribe to the channel if you are not already, because there's lots of fun stuff here happening all the time. And if you'd like to support the channel and continue to help us create new things, new projects, new films, please go to patreon.com/thegingerrunner and consider joining the Patreon crew there. That's it. All right, guys. See you next week. Bye.